Time to check in with Charlie Potter, colleague from BamaOnline.com, part of the 247sports.com network. Charlie, I wonder what you're up to today.
Yeah, not a lot. I wish that's what I was saying, but a lot going on in terms of Alabama football.
So where do we sit right now, Charlie? You like me, you kind of wake up to the news. I know Dan Wolkin of USA Today reporting that Lane Kiffin set to be named the next head football coach at the University of Houston. Then Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports and some others chimed in and said, not so quick. Is that kind of where we're at right now? Wait and see with Lane Kiffin?
Yeah, and the initial report from USA Today, it said he was expected to be hired, and that pending the meeting with the school president, who has the final okay, that would probably be the case, and that's kind of mirroring what everybody else is saying. That it's not a done deal yet, but that's the way it's leaning. It's Lane Kiffin and a couple of interior guys, or I guess guys that are already there, and Applewhite and. I just completely forgot the other guy's name just off the top of my head. But Kiffin's a finalist, and everyone's leaning towards him getting the job in terms of what they're hearing. So it's not necessarily conflicting reports. It's just wait and see if this is actually what happens. A little intriguing in terms of this, just because there were murmurs out there that Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma's assistant, was making a surge for this job, and then Lane Kiffin's being mentioned for the South Florida opening, but now it appears that he's the front runner. We're still in a wait and see approach, but it's looking more and more like Kiffin's gonna get that job.
Lane Kiffin at Houston, Charlie, has to be the absolute best case scenario for all of this for not only Lane Kiffin but Nick Saban, right?
Yeah, I mean, Lane Kiffin wants to be a head coach, and Tom Herman really turned that program around and made it a formidable force. And not only that, but he's not going to LSU. If this is the case, if everything turns out this way, he's not going to LSU to be the offensive coordinator. So he's not facing Lane every year and in a rivalry game. I think that's something that Nick Saban wanted to avoid. And he always wants to see his assistants move on and get head coaching positions. He's been a real advocate of that. But I think more so in this case, with a rival coming after him hot and heavy, he was definitely putting Lane's name out there and promoting him for what he's done for the offense. And then I think he's done a decent job, and I think Alabama fans, get upset with him for not running the football. But just I think alone with the quarterback development that he's had over the past 3 years is something that teams have to pay attention to, and they obviously are.
Yeah, that's the thing you can't argue with, You can talk about run the ball more, less jet sweeps maybe, less bubble screens. But the mic dropper stat for Lane Kiffin is going to be 3 Southeastern Conference championships in 3 years with 3 different quarterbacks. That's the one thing his detractors will never be able to argue with. And it's a hell of a stat. There's no doubt about it. Now, looking at this Alabama staff outside of Lane Kiffin, any rumblings about some other staff members? Is Mario Cristobal involved in some situations? Jeremy Pruitt? Where does it go from Kiffin in terms of head coaching searches with other Alabama assistants?
I've seen both of their names mentioned just a couple of times for the South Florida opening. Those are just those initial hot boards that are coming out, but Cristobal is a guy that would make sense there just because of his ties to the state and being a former Miami player, a head coach at FIU, and obviously he's done a tremendous job at recruiting that state for Alabama. So anytime an opening comes up in the state of Florida, it seems like Mario Cristobal is mentioned there. Pruitt, that's an interesting one just because he's had short spurts of being a defensive coordinator, albeit he's been a successful one. I don't know how much interest is there mutually or if at all, in terms of the assistants, and obviously it's so early from the South Florida opening and others that are going to open, because as we know, this coaching carousel just keeps spinning. But I think those are early, to say the least.
Yeah, maybe Cristobal down at Florida Atlantic makes the most sense. Obviously, real thick ties to South Florida, former player at Miami, former head coach at Florida International. So we'll see where it goes from here. Now, in terms of replacing Lane Kiffin, you got that hot board ready for us, Charlie, on BamaOnline.com yet? Is it constructed? I know we've conversed a little bit about it this morning. What do you think in terms of possible replacements for Lane Kiffin?
Working on it. I mean, I'm not going to post it until he's officially named the head coach.
Oh, come on, Charlie. What's the fun in that?
I think the accuracy is the fun in that one. But obviously you have some guys that are in-house that are the offensive coordinators and successful ones at that, and Steve Sarkisian and Mike Loxley, although there are rumblings out there that Steve Sarkisian, I guess if he would be the offensive coordinator, I need to learn how to say his name.
Just Sark.
But, but that he's out of the race, and, for whatever reason that is not completely clear. That might be so, but Mike Loxley's has a great track record of recruiting. He's the offensive coordinator at Maryland and other places, and I think that's one that both those guys have had a hand in the development of Jalen Hurts, and as he's going to be the quarterback for the foreseeable future, I think those are guys you're going to have to consider. Obviously, you're going to look elsewhere because Nick Saban is never really promoted from within to the coordinator position. And, it remains to be seen who those guys are. But it'll be an interesting hire. You have your quarterback set, which is something we haven't seen in recent years. You have a ton of talent coming back with only really one senior that's contributed of late, and O.J. Howard leaving and possibly Cam Robinson. So you're going to have a full arsenal of weapons at your will call, and I think a lot of people are going to be wanting that job.
As we let you go, Charlie, pretty big basketball game coming up Sunday for Avery Johnson's team. Been flying under the radar with all the football talk, but, this is the kind of game that Alabama won't be expected to win out at Oregon, but one that it could definitely use given where it sits right now in its non-conference schedule.
Yeah, definitely. This is a team that it hung tight with last year in Birmingham, but with it being in Eugene, I think it's a completely different situation. Oregon's one of the top teams in the country, even though they've kind of looked a little bit mortal in some games. And they're out in Maui. They beat Tennessee in overtime and lost to Georgetown. But they beat a team that beat Alabama on the road in Valparaiso. They beat them by more than 20, and that was without their best player. So it's going to be certainly a challenge for Alabama. They're wanting to bounce back, after a disappointing loss to Texas, but I don't know if this is the place you do it.
Tough spot, and if it doesn't happen, Alabama needs to sort of run the table from that point on to go probably 8-4, I guess, in the league before it gets to conference play. And that Clemson game, Charlie, could end up being really pivotal for this team if it doesn't win on Sunday. I think it's got to be Clemson after that in the non-conference to really have a chance when you look at large bids and postseason play, maybe even in general down the road. Well, Charlie, as always, really appreciate you joining us here on the program. Moved you up a day early, getting out of town a little bit tomorrow, so appreciate you accommodating the show and look forward to your coverage coming up. Should be hot and heavy with both college football playoff practices getting underway in the near future, and then, of course, the situation with Lane Kiffin. Thanks a lot, Charlie.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.